Hi, my name is Casey Matringa, and I am the newborn photographer for Narrow Road Productions in Soldotna, Alaska. Today we're going to be working on one of my trademark fresh floral sets. So I'm really excited to share this one with you because this is one I get a lot of requests for because I use them so frequently in my sessions. We just wrapped up filming all of my table posing, so be sure to go check that out if you haven't. But moving on to the next, we're going to start doing some stuff here on the floor. I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III. My lens is a Sigma Art 35mm. My light source is an Einstein with an 86-inch PLM. I technically have 3 diffusers on it. I have the black on the backside with the silver interior. I have a diffuser layer over the top of the silver just to reduce the amount of hot spots. And then on this front-facing side of my modifier, I have 2 layers of diffusers, again, just to soften those highlights and get some really pretty even lighting. My settings for floor sets, I just minorly adjust from whatever I do on the table. I keep my shutter at 200 because with the Einstein, that's about as far as you can push it without getting that black bar across your image from it not being able to recoil fast enough. My aperture is always at 1.8. Unless I'm doing family shots, I always keep it at 1.8. My ISO varies just slightly. So on my floor sets, I bump it up just a little bit to 160. The light itself, I keep my power at the lowest setting possible. For white balance, I shoot in Kelvin at 5200 for all of my sessions. So whenever I'm doing one of my fresh floral sets, the way that I select my flowers is I try to start with the larger flowers. I usually like an uneven amount of my larger flowers, but it's not super like cookie cutter. It doesn't always have to be that way. That's just a preference of mine because I'm really particular about balance. I also like a few more like medium-sized filler flowers. As you can see, like my primary large ones are these garden roses here. And then for my filler, smaller, medium ones, I have some ranunculus, and then I forgot the names of these because I'm not a florist and I can't keep up with them. And then I have lots of different types of greenery. In this case, I got a really good variety of greenery because I've got this variegated color of eucalyptus, and then I don't even know what this is, but it's cool and I've never used it before, so I thought that would be fun. For years, I was selecting my own flowers. I have a local florist who always gave me permission to go into their cooler, and I was able to hand select all of my single stems and then just basically arrange my own bouquet. Now, one of my very dear friends is an amazing florist, and I basically just send her a screenshot of my client's questionnaire with their color palette and let her work her magic because she does a really excellent job organizing a color palette together that I would have never thought of myself. So she basically just delivers exactly what I need, so I don't really have to go through the effort of selecting different sizes and variations to make sure I have a good balance. She has that all set up for me, so it's really ideal if you can connect with a local floral vendor who can just really establish a great working relationship with you. Whenever I'm doing one of my floral setups, I always like to make sure I have almost everything that I need on hand. So back in the day, I don't know how long everybody's been newborn photographers for. If you were around for all this, there was that trend of the crocheted cocoons and bowls that were really popular to lose. They phased out pretty fast, thankfully. However, they come in handy really well for stuffers for my floor sets. I do also like to use this handy little thing. It's a bucket poser. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I actually got this off of AliExpress for $13. I don't know the names of all the primary newborn vendors that carry them. I know there's some similar ones, some that are probably way better than this. This works really well for me. So it's basically everyone's choice because what works for one isn't always going to work for the next, but this works really excellent for me. And then sometimes just building off of it with some of these stuffers to help support the baby. I also make sure that I have selected my headpiece, which in this case I'm going to use another bonnet from K2C Blooms. This is the one with the interchangeable ties. So if you saw my table posing, you'll see the same bonnet used just with the blue tie instead. So you can get many different looks with the same exact prop. I always make sure I have a good texture layer that's going to go underneath baby that's going to help cover all of my posers. I always make sure I select the color to just be in coordination with whatever the headpiece is, but also complement the florals without competing with your florals. You have so much color usually going on with the florals that you don't want to pick such a bold, loud, saturated color with your textiles and your headpiece that everything is kind of competing and you lose the focus on what's most important, which is your baby. I like to make sure I have different bases. These I got really cheap from Walmart. I think they were only like $1 or $2 a piece. They come in really handy. I like to have multiple ones so that I can build the flowers around the shape of my prop. I also got these cute little lifters. Honestly, I got them from the dollar bin in Target, so I don't know that you could find them again, but anything that can kind of create like a little bit of a lifter just to elevate one or two of your vases in the back, just because that's where your main height is going to be from your floral. And lastly, I always have a weight in all of my floor props because generally baby is elevated in the prop in a lot of your sets, and so I like to have this to counteract the weight to make sure that your object, your prop, is not going to risk toppling over while baby is inside of it. First, I just begin with partially prepping my prop. Today I'm going to use this little bamboo basket, and it's really lightweight, so again, all that much more important to make sure you have the weight in placement in the bottom of the basket because it actually makes it a lot more secure now. Next, I'm going to go ahead and prop this in here. I always like making sure that it's stuffed pretty flat at the bottom so that it makes a good spot for their bottom part. And then this top part, I actually like to leave it up over the lip of my prop, especially if it's going to be in a round bucket. It just gives a little bit of extra cushion for the baby. And then if I need to, after the baby's already posed, I can help encourage this to go under a little bit. I just try to make sure that I'm avoiding their arms having a lot of pressure on a hard rim like this because it can be uncomfortable for a lot of babies and they will let you know. Next, I'm going to start focusing on my florals. So it helps to have a pair of scissors because a lot of flowers are really fibrous stems, so they're really hard to just break and snap just with your bare hands. So first, I like to start with my largest flowers. When you're dealing with roses, they're actually a great flower that you can manipulate their shape. Tulips are another good one that work really well for being manipulated. So as you can see, this rose all on its own is actually really tall. So the baby's head's actually going to be about here. I want the height of my tallest flower probably no taller than 6 inches above my prop. Otherwise, you have to shoot really wide to get in all the detail, and then the baby just looks tinier and tinier, especially because it's really mostly just their head that's going to be showing. I always cut off just a little bit to begin with because I can always cut off more if I need to, but if I cut it too short, kind of screwed. It's harder to raise it back up and get it to stay there. So that's a pretty good height right there. So because I have 2 of these large ones and then my other large ones are a different color, I'm going to leave one of them closed up and then another one I'm going to manipulate. So first, I want to look at my 2 larger ones and see this one is beautiful exactly the way it is. This one has kind of some wonky petals hanging off, so this one wants me to tear it up. So I'm going to start with my height on this one. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of hold this down between my legs, and I'm going to start working the petals. So you can actually dig your fingers in there, slowly kind of guide them out. You'll hear them kind of cracking and snapping. You're basically kind of murdering it, but you just want it to be really pretty, so it doesn't matter how long it lives through this process. So I'm going to kind of guide some of these outer petals open, and you can already see how open, and it makes the size, because I only have 2 of these, it gives a lot of good contrast in your size. Some of your petals might actually pop off, and that's fine. Like this one, I accidentally broke these off, but we're just gonna stuff it back in there because you won't even know in the pictures. So now you have a beautiful looking garden style rose, and one that's closed up and beautiful as is as well for just some good variety to your set. So I'm gonna start off putting one of my vases in the back. I do want to separate these because there's only 2 of them, so I don't want them to be clustered together. So whenever I'm planning my set, I don't always use the curtain style lighting. It's been a style that I've been using a lot of lately because it just looks really pretty and soft. I like the flowy look of the curtains, especially because this is going to be all soft floral colors. So I've got my light source directly on the other side to give it the illusion that this is a fake window. So they call it faux window lighting. Because my light source is going to be coming from this direction, my composition is I want my basket to technically be the furthest to the left of my image, and then the rest of my composition to fall to the right of it to make sure that I'm getting all of these really pretty curtains in here. So whenever I'm styling baby propped up in a bucket, I want an asymmetrical curve around the basket. I don't want it to be super even and engulfed on both sides. I like to have the heavy part on the opposite side of my light source. So I'm gonna put my bigger, heavier flowers behind the basket, but a little offset to the left or the right, just depending on which side is opposite of your light source. So once I get my two bigger flowers there, this one in the front is quite a bit taller than this one. I might end up changing that here in a minute, but I tweak those final details once I get a lot more filled in. So at one point, after I get my larger ones put in, I like to see everything. It's hard to see all of my variety and how much I have of each when they're all combined in one vase together. So I do at some point start to kind of like laying them out just to make sure as I'm putting them in the vases, I'm doing a pretty well balanced selection. So before I start adding my filler flowers, I usually like to pause and add in a little bit of greenery. Oh, this is gonna be so pretty. And then this I can maximize by actually breaking that branch off, putting the heavier one here in the back somewhere, kind of checking my height on these because sometimes I'll have to cut down the greenery as well. I do like to peel the leaves off towards the bottoms of the stems because of the opening size on these. I really get them stuffed. So if you have too much leaves in there, then it actually just expands your circumference of your stem quite a bit and it makes it really hard to fit a lot in there. So the flowers in the back always have the longest stems. As I'm starting to come up and taper here on the side, I want them a little bit shorter so that way the one in the front isn't covering with the one that's behind it. And because I've got this really beautiful yellow rose back here, I'm gonna bring another one up towards the side. And I want quite a bit shorter for this one. But because this is my closed one, this is my open one, I didn't want to open this yellow one. I am going to end up opening this one just a little bit more. These yellow ones are cool. These are, I think she called them latte roses because of the color, and they have like a double swirl at the center of them. It's really pretty. Just add a little bit of dimension and texture just by pulling at this one. There's not quite as many layers, so it doesn't take as long to open this one versus this one. So now this one's gonna be competing with this pink one. And because it's much bigger, I wanna bring it down to where it's not quite as in focus, but yet that really gorgeous color is up here in front with her. Just kind of pull that balance. So now I have three roses together, so we need other flowers up here. So these ones are really cool. I don't know what they are, but they're super fun. It reminds me of Horton Hears a Who. Put in that one. Now we need a little bit more greenery in the front. This one has that really pretty rich color, so we're gonna pop this one in there. So just adding a little bit more dimension with your greenery. Now because I have the other piece of this one in the back, I kind of want a little bit more of this up in the front because the front is ultimately what's going to be in focus the most with baby. I always save, if I can, my most delicate flowers for last. So the more you work with flowers, or if you already are pretty educated with different types of flowers, ranunculus are pretty fragile. They don't support themselves well. So I always want to put those in last because they have a really pliable stem. And so the longer it's just sitting there, especially in a warmer space, it's going to continue to droop and droop and droop. And then I feel like I'm rushing myself while I'm styling the sets. So I try to save those for last if I can. I have lots of vases in a tote, so if even 4 vases isn't enough, it's always great to have a minimum of 10 vases in your studio because I like different heights and styles, especially if one's gonna be showing in the front. So it's always helpful to have more than you need, then you'll never regret not having enough to accomplish your vision. There's not really any specific way I can explain how to arrange the flowers because it's going to be different based on the prop that you're using, the height of it, the width of it, how many vases you use, the variety of flowers you have. So just play with it and just give yourself the freedom to take your time, because that's where it gets stressful, because there isn't a set pattern to follow every time. So in my experience, when I first started using them, I just had all this pressure of rushing because I always feel so bad when people are waiting on me, especially these really tired parents. But ultimately, this is something that they do want. And with my clients, it's a request that they add on to their session whenever they book with me. And so it is something that they want, and they want me to do it well. So give yourself the freedom to take your time. That's the best advice I can give. Once I get everything in the vases, then I also like to have a little bit of filler on the floor. So I'll use some of the greenery from some of the stems that I'll have just kind of loosely placed, because to me, it looks really top heavy when you have all these beautiful flowers, and especially when I have white on the floor. So I like to just incorporate a little bit of filler here and there, especially these are some of my more favorite leaves of a lot of the ones that I have. I kind of favor this style over a roses leaf. And then the way that I do it is because I have it asymmetrical and heavier on this side because it's opposite of my light source. Then what I like to do is even on the floor filler, a little bit heavier here and then tapering towards my light. So I'll do a few flowers as well with the greenery. So what I do with the rose is I'll usually save one of the roses that I'm like, oh, on its own, that one's really not the prettiest. So he's gonna do his job by turning into confetti. So you can grab at the base, grab the rose at the top, and simply just pop that off. A lot of the times you can actually get it, there we go, to pull right off of the stem. So now you can see a lot of roses naturally have this really bright yellow tone at the bottom. I already have a lot of yellow tones in here, so I'm actually gonna leave those. But whenever I have a white rose and I have a lot of really soft colors for all of my flowers, I'll actually take my scissors and snip that before I do my floor scatter. Otherwise, I'm doing them one by one, and that's super time consuming, and that's where you extend how long this takes you. So since we're gonna leave the yellow, I'm just gonna break this up a little bit. I don't want too much, but I'm just gonna add in a little bit here or there. I like it super random. I don't like to have any specific pattern with these. Okay, so I also have a couple of these. I like the little buds. I also liked this one, so I saved this little guy so that I can just pop him off and have a couple of buds and an actual flower on the floor as well, instead of just petals. We're gonna bring this little guy down here. I'm gonna make the stem shorter so that I can make it kind of prop up a little bit more. There we go. You don't want it so far against your basket, because by the time you start shooting, again, you start shooting at a 45-degree angle downward. I never shoot straight towards the back of my set. I never shoot from an aerial position when a baby is propped up head on hands in a bucket. It's 45-degree angle downward, down the bridge of their nose. And so the top of your basket might come out because it's usually the wider space. So sometimes you can even lose what you have on the floor once you're at that angle. So I always have it pulled a little away, so that way I'm still keeping in all of that beautiful detail on the bottom. So once I've got all of my flowers set up, I take my textile. This is an extremely long wrap. These are some of my favorite wraps. These are the ones that I primarily use by Olive and Lace. They're custom cheesecloth wraps. She does a lot of custom dyes for me because she loves me. I'm gonna take somewhere a little bit offset. I don't want it directly in the middle because I have a lot to work with here. But I want a little bit of my tail going off in this free space that I have on this side. So that's where I'm gonna place first, down there on the bottom. The rest of this, I'm actually gonna be using to fill. So I'm gonna grab it a little bit offset here. I'm gonna put some of this in the back, but still draped over, because my plan is to have that out so that once I get baby in the basket, then I can grab this and stuff and support behind her. That also helps hide the diaper. And then in the front here, I'm gonna pop this back out. I'm gonna have this draped across the front. I love the looks of the raw edges. So if I'm paying attention enough, I'll make sure that I have the wrap flipped to show that side, but again, that is not a detail that will make or break your session. Most parents aren't gonna notice that part. And then I'm gonna have it propped up a little bit on this side. And again, leave this tail out, carefully set it so it's not messing up what I've arranged down here, because I really want to use that to stuff behind baby. Because she's a little bitty thing, she's only about 6 pounds. There's a lot of space in that basket for her. I wanna make sure her body is really snug and supported. So I'm gonna make sure that I have a couple of these crocheted pieces on hand. I'm actually gonna start with placing one down in the basket. And what I do is I like taking one of the bigger ones so I can fold the bottom to be a little bit more of like a padding and help fill in that space behind her, because she's not gonna fill up that basket with her body. I like to have a tail up at the top because sometimes I overstuff my basket. I do my best to gauge based on the size of my prop, size of my baby. If it is too much, it's easier to just grab this and slowly slide it out of the prop and remove it than it is to get your baby in the basket and be like, oh, I need to tuck something under her tush, and then just make her angry because I'm messing with her. So I'll go ahead and start by having that set in there. And ultimately, like with the flowers so close to the basket, it can be really hard because you have such a confined space to get your baby placed in here. So one excellent thing that I like to do is take each face one by one and just set it out. This allows you to safely get your baby in your basket, and then once you bring them all in, it's basically exactly how you already had it set up before. Now that I've been touching all of these flowers, because the baby doesn't have any known allergies, I want to be really careful that any kind of residue from the flowers themselves are not going to irritate her skin. So I'm going to make sure that I have my hand sanitizer on hand. And then I also, because there could be some residue on my hands from messing with the stems and the flowers and pollen, I'm going to make sure that I use a baby wipe to not only use the hand sanitizer to clean, but also wipe off anything that might be left over. You can also run to the bathroom, wash your hands, whatever is easiest for you. My bathroom is on a whole nother level, so this is actually the more faster method for me and still gets the job done. Okay, so I always have the head pieces that I put on last. One is because I do use a lot of preserved flowers on my headbands and halos, and I don't want to risk damaging them if I put it on the baby and then it gets messed up by my hands or baby flailing as I'm trying to transfer them into the position and the proper on the table. So I usually like to wait till last. However, with a bonnet, it's always easiest to put that on first. So we're gonna slip this on real quick. So on the side that I like to have my ties, I try to keep in mind the aesthetics of the overall image. So I'm gonna have the florals heavy on this side. So ultimately I wanna try and just get the tails of my bonnet just draping off on this side, because this bonnet ties are gorgeous and kind of the inspiration behind the floral colors that we chose. So I wanna make sure that those are being featured as well. You don't like the itchy bonnet? So I'm gonna turn her a little bit. Sometimes that's easier to get those ties. Try to get everything as situated as I can. Okay, so whenever I'm doing a bow with my ties, I usually like probably about a good 2 to 3 inch length on each of, I guess you call the bunny ear of the bow. That's just personal preference, but by the time you get their arms propped up and that tie gets just kind of tucked in the nape of their neck, then you actually lose some of the length on there. So I like to make them just a little bit longer, because if they are too long, it's a lot easier to just pull on the tail and shorten after they're already posed than it is to just grab on these and try to mess with them and get it pulled out to be bigger. So this one, because she's gonna be propped up on her hands, I do like to pre-pose as much as I can. So I get one hand placed over the other. Once I get her hands pre-posed essentially, then I always roll her towards the hand that is holding her pose in place. So because she's in a wrap, I actually can use the swaddle itself to help turn her, kind of like a little rotisserie chicken. Okay, she's trying to decide what she thinks of that. So I'm going to get my thumb under one arm and one of my middle or my ring finger under the arm on the other side, just to help keep the hands under her chin, help support and lift the elbows into the position. I'm gonna lean her forward here. And then I actually am going to scoot on my behind with her tushy in my lap. And then also keep in mind what my thighs are doing. Because now I can get back up on my knees. She's still in a secure position, still pre-posed. And then I'm gonna make sure I drape the ties over so they don't get stuck underneath of her. And then she's having a hard time transitioning, so we're gonna do a little rocking. She loves it when I do this. Okay, we're gonna drop her in. I don't take my hand out fully. What I'm gonna do, unless they move their heads, then I'll take my back hand and support the back of their neck. She actually has a really good height in this basket, so I don't need to change the positioners underneath. So underneath of her, I still only have the base of this poser and then that one crocheted rep, which not everybody's gonna have these. You can use swaddles, you can use other wraps that you already have. Anything that's gonna be thin, you can fold it up and kind of mold it to be supportive. She's struggling falling into this pose, so I'm not gonna get picky and mess with her arms. She did manage to pop one of those little hands out. And again, like, I'm not gonna make her angry by forcing her to do something that she doesn't wanna do. I'm mostly, whenever I'm posing, just trying to guide them and manipulate them without them knowing it. So we're just gonna let her settle a little bit. I can tell that when she does relax that she is sinking backwards. So what I'm gonna wanna do is add in a little bit more support in the back area here. Ultimately, whenever I get my final pose achieved, I rarely ever try to accomplish a perfect vertical head on top of their hands. I think it's beautiful and I see other photographers do it, but again, I kind of am a little bit more on the non-perfection side with my pictures, because I already have such a beautiful aesthetic and vibe going on in the rest of my set that I always think it's really cute when the baby's head is tilted to the side. Plus, it is another position when their head is perfectly vertical up and down that you always need to make sure a hand is spotting, because no baby can ever just 100% keep their head up and down without eventually tilting from one side to the other. And so again, you just want to protect their necks. So it's a lot easier if you have them supported properly in your basket to just allow them to comfortably lean their head to the side. The side that I let them lean to, though, is the head tilts towards the light. And what that does is it allows the light to go down the bridge of the nose. Instead of, if her head was tilted this way, your light would be going up her nose, and that's not always the most flattering shadows and highlights in your final image. Whenever you have them posed in the basket, they are never straight up and down with their hands propped up, because their head is not going to be supported that way. So their head is going to be a lot more floppy, back and forth, side to side. If you actually have them at a little bit more of a 45 to where their tushy is towards the back and they're leaning towards the front rim of your prop, then that actually gives their head a lot more support, and then it's a little bit more supportive of their spine as well. So she's acting pretty relaxed. She might get annoyed with me if I try to pop that hand under there, but we're just gonna go ahead and give it a shot and see what she does. So I actually use my thumb, the back of my thumb. I try to wiggle my way under the hand that's already there. She's like, don't touch me. And then lift, and then use my other fingers to just pop that hand back underneath. And then I can use my hand to kind of help hold the elbows in place, the other hand behind, just give her a little bit of movement, help her settle. The only time I do movement on a baby like this is when I have my hand firmly placed behind the nape of their neck. That allows to where you're supporting their spinal cord where it attaches to the nape of their neck, so that you're not jolting the part of their neck and spine back and forth. My hand being positioned in the back of her neck is also against her back and the back of her head so that it's all one fluent movement. Instead of her head going back and forth, her whole upper body is actually doing the movement in unison. She's still having a little bit of a hard time settling. So most of the time, if their head is gonna be tilted this way, I do prefer my ties on this side, but I was worried that the flowers being over here was gonna compete with this, and I have a lot more white space over here because the flowers are heavy on this side. So I wanted to balance the pattern of this by being on this side. So as I start to remove my hand, you can see that she is still tilting backwards. So that means that her tushy is not elevated enough. So what I'm gonna do is take another crocheted fabric, keep my hand supporting on the back of her head. I use my leg to support the front of the basket because ultimately I'm gonna be messing with this side and I don't want it to lean forward or jostle too much. I wanna try and keep her secure as I can and try not to disturb her. So you can use your other hand to work underneath. I actually will grab on the back of the diaper. Sometimes that will help just lift their tush without you using your hands to dig underneath of their hiney. And then see, now that I've elevated her little tushy, her head is a lot more supported because she's at a much more comfortable angle. So now that she's looking pretty good, I'm gonna take this extra tail that I left over here and fill in this back area. Same with this tail here. I'm gonna fill in this back area. Excellent. So when I'm placing all of my vases back in position around the bucket, what I'm gonna do is I have my knee pad and I'm going to keep my hand on her at all times. I'm gonna pivot my body back to the front. And I was able to do that in one motion with my hand still behind her head, supporting the whole time. Switching hands, I'm gonna bring my other vases back. And then from this angle, when I bring all the vases back, I'm able to see how I essentially had them set up in the first place. So I'm gonna bring my big one back in first. Once I have baby in here, sometimes I like to grab individual flowers and bring them forward. Some of them are kind of lazy, like this one's resting on the brim of the basket, but I actually think that's really cute. I'm gonna use my hands to even now kind of coax it open a little bit more just to add more texture to this one, all still while giving her head support. She's gotten so comfortable that now she's decided to give up her passy on her own without me trying to take it from her. So coming from the front, because I put her in the basket when I was sitting on the side, I can see that she is actually pointed away from my light. So all you have to do is just rotate your basket without moving her at all. I like to give the illusion that some of the flowers are coming up and around her and just kind of engulfing her like she's in this little garden. So once I get her in position, if she's still doing quite well, then I will continue to go ahead and pull on some of the flowers just to bring them in closer to her. Okay, so once I've got everything situated and I'm about ready to shoot, I don't keep a hand on their head at all times because most of the time with babies, when you go from touch to not touch, it's stimulating for them, so that can actually encourage them to move or flinch and respond. So once I'm ready, I just kind of feel them out. I take my hand off, see how their head support is because of the angle of their body and everything I've already described about how I pose them the way that I do. It's all supportive, but it's also to gain me the proper angle that I need to shoot the overall composition of my photo. So once I'm ready to shoot and see, my hands are always close by so that if she does move, I can immediately respond and make sure that she's safe. When your hands are on them and they're working through some bubbles, you can feel with their hands when they start to relax again. You can also see with her forehead, those wrinkles start to soften. That's how you can kind of gauge when they're settling back into their position, or whether or not you need to continue to give them a little bit of movement to help relax them and settle them more. I always like to make sure that their pacifier is on hand, because if they do have tummy bubbles and they instantly have a painful one that makes them cry, it's just right there. You can grab one and pop it in. She seems to be doing pretty good though, so we're gonna get ready for our first shot. I'm gonna keep my hand either on her or close by as I use my knees to just kind of work myself backwards a little bit more. Once I'm ready to shoot, I'm gonna keep my hand hovering. I'm gonna get up on my knees a little bit, and I'm gonna get ready for my shot, get my focus, and then lift, shoot, bring my hand back. Get my focus, lift, shoot, bring my hand back. Look at the back of my camera, see if I like my composition on that. I also, when I'm shooting with a faux window light, I also like to shoot from the shadows just a little bit. Most of the time when they have their head propped towards the light and they're tilted more, it looks really cute from this angle, but even when they're propped up straight, it looks really cute as well. She actually prefers her head propped up straight. I even tried coaxing her and she's not letting me. So she's actually super secure with her head propped up straight up and down, which for me is actually a rare way to shoot this pose. So I'm gonna go from the side. You can do a vertical one. I have a lot of clients who like to order albums of their newborn sessions. So when you have almost your whole gallery that's a landscape orientation, it doesn't give you a lot of variety when you're trying to connect collages of your images together. So I'm shooting for my product. So if you are a shoot and burn photographer, you could really shoot this gallery any which way you want. I like a lot of variety of portrait orientation and landscape orientation. I also shoot my first one wide for this set because I want to get all the beautiful flowers in there. Once I swing to the side, I'll usually do my portrait orientation, and then I'll come in close and do a close-up shot of the baby from the side angle, but also from the front as well. And then from the front, you can come back, you can do some close-up ones of just the baby's face. You can do a portrait one from the front as well. And then if the baby is responding really well to this pose and not kind of a ticking time bomb, then once I'm satisfied with all the shots that I've gotten, I like to do a little variation. She's probably not gonna let me because she's not a fan of me messing with her hands. But what you can do with some babies is pop one hand out, try and coax. I have my finger under her chin, trying to keep her from tucking her chin back behind the hand that she's resting on. That keeps her chin propped up on top of her hand, so that way her face is still open to your shot and she's not completely destroying the pose, because she naturally is a chin tucker when she moves. So she doesn't seem to really care about her pacifier or be mad at me. So now that I've got her head tilted just a little bit, oh, she's still moving a little, so we're gonna let her settle some more. Some babies have that sensory where if you hand them something, they grasp, or the opposite happens and they just completely get upset and are like, oh my gosh, what's touching me? So you just kind of have to feel it out. Sometimes by doing this, it can kind of destroy your shot. If you want to take your safety shots and just letting their little arm drape down, that's perfectly fine. So what I'll do is just correct some of the fingers. She bent a few up here. Just give her a little wiggle. Use my thumb to, again, keep the chin slightly posed. And then from the front angle, you've got this really cute little lazy pose with her little arm hanging out over the basket. And then you can take your shots with that as your safety ones. But ultimately, what I usually get, because it's so stinking adorable, is you can usually get them to clasp onto the stem of a flower. So they're just holding a little bitty flower. She's probably gonna get mad, most likely, or she might be too lazy. So I will, oh, she's gonna be too lazy. So actually, I cheat sometimes, and what I've done in the past, this is why I especially love this basket. Oh man, she's a noodle. She's not gonna clench it though. I'm gonna hold her hand closed around it and see if maybe she'll tighten up a little. Nope, she's too lazy. So what you can do is hook the thumb with the stem, and this basket is awesome because it has these little slats, and then boom, you stick it in the basket and it looks like she's holding it. Look how cute that is. Okay, so once I'm finished shooting in a set with my baskets, I don't care how I'm messing up the space. I'm gonna keep a hand supported behind the head. I'm gonna pull or slide. I never lift one-handed, I'm not that strong. I'm gonna end up bringing the basket closer to me. I like to get legs on both sides of the basket because to me it's the most supportive, because what I can do is then tilt baby and then use my hand to guide their torso and slide them out onto my leg. So there's no lifting, putting too much pressure under their arms. If you have babies who have heart conditions, you should never lift a baby out of a basket under their arms. For that scenario, if you have a baby with heart conditions, you always tilt and basically just kind of like peel or roll them out. But really, even if they don't have a heart condition, that's the most comfortable way, rather than lifting their dead body weight out, and then it just applies a lot of really tense pressure under those arms, which is really uncomfortable. So that's how I get them out of my props. So in summary of everything that I just went over for my fresh floral sets, best advice that I can't say enough, take your time when you're setting that up. It can be really frustrating. You're out of your element. You're not a florist. So you can kind of feel like you're shooting in the dark when you're doing it. You'll eventually get more confident each time you do it, but take your time. There's no rush in this. Ultimately, the parents want a gorgeous, stunning piece of artwork for their home. And so that's where you need to just make sure that you're adjusting your expectations. The set itself doesn't yield a lot of images because you really only have them in one position. That's why I like to do a variation of the one pose if they'll let me get the arm kicked out. And again, I always talk about how I always get my safety shots, because I've had in the past where I focus so much on the little details like the fingers and all of that, that I ended up sabotaging myself and never was able to recover from it, and therefore lost the whole set entirely. So I always get my safety shots. Then if the baby's doing well, always continue to fine tune if I feel like I have time, or if I'm just wanting to work on more technical things. Whenever you have a baby that's being really fussy and you've got all this time and work put into setting this up, what you can do is, this still looks beautiful when you're shooting from above. So what you can do is you can take a wrap and wrap them and essentially nest them down in their back, or you can do that with a crisscross wrap, or you can do the full body wrap that I'll show you in my wrapping videos. And you can have them to where the bottom part of them is down in the basket and they're elevated up. So that way they're kind of resting on their back and their face is elevated upwards. And then because you have all of these random faces and they're all separated, you can kind of fine tune how they go around the basket. So that way it still looks like a gorgeous floral set. You didn't waste all of your time, but you were still able to gain a stunning shot for the mom that the baby was ultimately happy with as well.